Are you looking to stay ahead of the curve in the latest trends in enterprise tech? Look no further than the Breaking Analysis podcast with Dave Vellante. This data-driven program dives into the most important topics facing the enterprise tech industry today. With a data-first approach that leverages ETR's renowned surveys of IT decision-makers and insight from the CUBE community, Breaking Analysis delivers in-depth research on the most important topics facing technologists and IT buyers. Whether you're a business leader, an IT professional, investor, or just an avid follower of the industry, this podcast is a must-listen. Just search Breaking Analysis Podcast wherever you get your podcast and tune in today to stay ahead of the game in enterprise tech.
Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome back to the Cloudcast. We're coming to you live from our massive Cloudcast studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. And it is almost the end of the year. It's hard to believe. Shows are wrapping up. AWS reInvent was a couple weeks ago. Gartner event is this week, and that's typically the last big conference here in the United States for the year. And I'm wrapping up my last bit of travel. After not having traveled for a number of years, getting back on the road has been different, without a doubt. But heading up to New York City this week to talk to some partners and customers on artificial intelligence. Really looking forward to that. But also looking forward to getting back home and spending the rest of the holidays with the family. We have a great topic and a great guest today. We're going to be talking about LLMOps, try and say that 3 times fast, and conversational intelligence, all for AI. And that is coming right up.
And we're back. And Aaron, good to be back with you. How you doing, man?
I'm good.
Good. We are... we've been talking a lot about different, topics around, this world, the world of AI that has become sort of the world of everything these days. It's sort of all consuming with all sorts of discussions. But, we spent a lot of time kind of digging into some of the behind the scenes stuff, how does MLOps work and, how are people provisioning things and dealing with schedulers? And we haven't really spent a lot of time looking at some of the applications and types of applications that are going to make AI much more useful for everyday people, right? We've talked about, kind of the common hello world sort of, we're going to write a thing for fraud, but we haven't really talked about stuff that everybody probably would like to have access to and sort of dig into. And I think we're going to dig into that quite a bit of that today. So why don't you go ahead and introduce our guest and we'll jump into this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just wanted to kind of reiterate to that. In my day job, I'm talking to customers pretty regular basis on all of this. And it's so interesting to see, especially from a lot of our listeners that tend to be more practitioners and more hands-on. There's this idea of like, hey, I get this idea of a model and I get this idea of, running ML ops and AI ops. But, oh, by the way, how do I set all this up? Because the barrier of entry seems to get hit pretty hard, pretty quick. And so with that, we have Alex, founder and CEO at Pathlight. Alex, first of all, tell everyone a little bit your background, and then we're going to go ahead and dig into the topics from there.
Sure. Thanks. And thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat more about taking this technology and actually building something that solves customer problems. My background is I'm here in Palo Alto, and I've spent my career in software and technology. I started at LinkedIn in the earlier days, and then started a series of companies. I started a company called SeatMe. If you make a reservation on Yelp, that's the product that's using. If you go to a restaurant that is using an iPad and they happen to be on Yelp, that's still that product that we've built. So I was at Yelp for a few years after they acquired that company, and since then have been on a few different journeys in the kind of B2B SaaS world, and most recently started Pathlight, which is a conversation intelligence platform built from the ground up on this, amazing new technology that is maybe AI generally or generative AI more specifically.
Fantastic. And Alex, let's start right there because this concept, first of all, what is conversational intelligence, right? And so what is the concept of conversational intelligence? How does it apply to most organizations today? And then what problem are you trying to solve?
Sure, and I think we'll get into this a little bit later. This is a great example of a category that has existed, a problem that has existed, that legacy software and even legacy machine learning that was state of the art 12 months ago has tried to solve, but there was always a gap in what customers wanted versus what was technically possible until now. Conversation intelligence simply is servicing this realization that your customer conversations might be the most important piece of data that you have, and they can and every important insight, business opportunity, or risk probably starts in one customer conversation. And at some point, you listen to enough of them, you notice a trend, and you act on it. And the companies that move the quickest, the companies that are the most successful, they typically are the companies that have the best handle on the pulse of their customers, are listening as closely as possible to their customers and what they're saying. And so customer conversations can be sales conversations, they can be customer support conversations. As companies get larger and as they start entering the mid-market or the Global 2000, the Fortune 500, they're having thousands of customer conversations every single day across their millions of customers that they might have. And so the underlying goal of conversation intelligence is to analyze customer conversations and pull out insights, trends, risks, anything that will be impactful to the business and their leaders, so that they can make decisions, strategic decisions and tactical decisions, knowing that they have with full confidence that they've got a perfect view of what the actual customer wants and needs. And maybe finally, just to contrast this with what the state of the world for a company that doesn't have conversation intelligence is, the way that you would solve this problem without software is you do manual review, and you either hire people or you yourself are manually listening to conversations, or doing some sort of cursory kind of high-level analysis with as I said, like the legacy machine learning libraries that were available. So maybe a little bit of sentiment, a little topic modeling, keyword detection, something like that. And at the end of the day, you're going to sleep knowing that you don't really have a picture. You've got a very small sample of what's happening, and you're extrapolating and making a ton of assumptions. And that's very scary for our customers. And one of the reasons why they've been so excited to finally be able to get 100% coverage or 100% analysis of 100% of their conversations. So that's conversation intelligence in a nutshell.
That's interesting. It's you mentioned sometimes when you have larger organizations, Fortune 500 size organization, it becomes unwieldy to keep up with all these things. I think Aaron and I have been at both large companies as well as even small companies that are distributed, and I think the problem exists in all those places. Anywhere where you just don't have everybody sitting in the same room or listening to the same conversation. I'm curious, as you start working with different companies, do you find what do you find is typically the places that they start? I mean, obviously, anywhere there's money involved, so talking to customers or something. But is the idea of conversational intelligence built around the idea of kind of like a foundational model that could be applied to product managers talking about input about what they're building, or marketing teams talking about trends, or is it typically very focused around things that have like revenue as in the middle of the conversation?
Yeah, great question. One of the good and the bad things about this category is if you were to ask the C-suite of a company who owns customer conversations, maybe all of their hands go up. That's a good thing because they all care about it. Maybe more tactically, it's a bad thing because there's not one specific person who's going to really lead the charge there. But in general, we think of it as positive. Customer intelligence, and that really comes a lot from conversation intelligence. It touches everyone, and so you were already kind of listing through a few of those things. And from our perspective, every company is at a different stage and they have a different set of priorities. We've yet to meet a top level C-suite leader who doesn't care about customer conversations. So very often we're interfacing with them and their strategy for the company, CEO, COO, as well as the group that actually owns the customer conversation. So contact center, support, sales. But as you alluded to, customer conversations and conversation intelligence touches everybody. And so the marketing team, let's say they own retention. And so they really care about what are the drivers that are causing our customers to churn or not renew or not upsell, cross-sell or not repeat buy or however we define retention. So I want to understand that. So understand that, but also can we detect those customers moving forward such that we can put them back into marketing campaigns and hopefully prevent the churn? Let's say just as an example. You also said on the product side, and then for our e-com or retail customers, there's a supply chain component too there. And so the biggest drivers or impacts to the customer experience for those companies are very often product quality and supply chain issues. And so those groups are very interested in proactively identifying new issues that they haven't seen before, and so they don't know to look for, and to address them and fix them. And that's, again, I'm sure we'll get into this later, that's a huge advantage of generative AI, where previously existing ML, you kind of needed to know what to look for, pre-train for that, and then keep an eye out for it. Generative AI kind of moves you from reactive to proactive. It'll just detect what's happening and then generate, the insights or themes. It doesn't need to be told. It leverages transfer learning to be able to handle that really well.
So, Alex, that last piece is super fascinating to me because, in both day job as well as we manage statistics with the podcast, right? We're always trying to figure out, hey, what exactly is going on, and why did this number do this, or why did that number do that? But there's also an opportunity cost involved with all of this, right? There is an opportunity cost of digging into that, trying to figure it all out. But then the more data there is, the harder it is. And sometimes it's impossible for a human to really wrap their head around vast quantities of data or be able to consume that or do analyzation on something like that fast enough, right? And so is this truly like an opportunity cost of getting the insights versus it being overwhelming, and now generative AI has now solved for that problem? Is that a fair statement, Alex?
The underlying problem, as you said, is to do this any other way it's not like it's too expensive or it's impractical. It's truly impossible. And I think the classic pessimistic narrative is always, hey, AI is going to take our jobs, and what a company of 100 is doing, AI is going to allow 10 people to do that. Pathlight is an example and of my personal belief that AI is going to be more augment human capabilities than replace human capability. And so those 100 people can do the jobs of 1,000 people. And so we should focus less on the jobs that are going to be replaced and focus more on the jobs that we never could possibly hire for in the past. And this is an example. You could never hire someone to just sit at a desk for 24 hours a day and listen to every single customer conversation, usually multiple times, looking for different types of insights across millions of conversations. And it wouldn't be one person; it'd have to be a team of people. It's probably there's probably 20 different laws you would have to break in order to do that, and OSHA violations and what have you. But most importantly, a human just doesn't want to do that. They're just going to say no thanks. And so this is something that everyone understands. Customer conversations are critically important. They're this black box of incredible potential insights, and we have no way of mining them at scale. And so AI allows us to do this job that we just couldn't have possibly done. And that's you can prove that by just looking at how companies have been doing this over the last decade, and it's through a manual review. Hey, let's review 1% of conversations with humans and extrapolate. So this is very much a something that was just not possible until this technology came around.
Yeah. What, if possible, can we dive a little bit into how it works? Obviously, we've talked about generative AI. People are now getting familiar with it through ChatGPT and other types of things. Within the system, is it is it one sort of large foundational model that's able to look at, different aspects of a conversation, whether it's, in Salesforce or it's transcriptions and so forth, or, are you sort of having to say, okay, plug this model into this form of where information's coming from, this model into something else, and then there's kind of an aggregation? How does the system kind of figure out not only where the data is coming from, but then ultimately how to put it back into the hands of people to go, this is the most important stuff, this is what you should be looking at?
Sure. There's a lot there. Feel free to stop me if I get a little bit too in the weeds. But this is, I think, the most exciting part, and something I think you two will find interesting, and hopefully your audience finds interesting, is really the difference between this technology in the prototype phase versus the production phase. More generally, the way the product works is that we ingest customer conversations, so omni-channel, voice, phone, text, chat, email. That mix depends on a customer. We then do a variety of steps to process those conversations. And so the first step is cleaning, redacting PII. If it's voice, we transcribe it. All of those use various LLMs to get those jobs done. But then the bulk of the true conversation intelligence processing happens once we've done the cleaning and compression and redaction. And so we push it through a variety of processing steps. And so that's summarization, tagging, both configure tagging and generative tagging, and entity extraction, sentiment, resolution detection, intent classification, and then custom open-ended questions, agent performance scoring, every little kind of piece of data that a customer might want to understand from their conversations. We have a pipeline stage to handle that. Now, once we've taken that conversation and we've processed it and we've added all of this intelligence on top of it, we then obviously make that available in our application to interact with and look at analytics on top of all the data we're generating. But then also we send it back into our customers' data warehouse stack for them to run their own analysis and analytics on. And so that's at a high level, that's how it works. But getting back to this kind of differentiation between prototype and production, if you could imagine what the prototype of this product was, it was, very much your old LLM wrapper where those steps were much more simplistic and kind of just batched it into a couple of calls to a singular model provider, OpenAI or Anthropic, or something like that. And that made an incredible prototype. One of the things I like to say about this technology is it's never been easier to build a prototype. It's never been harder to scale. As someone who's had a background in cloud software for a while, we've gotten very used to having unlimited compute. And this app that I'm running works. Like, we can kind of scale it. We can turn the knobs on AWS and do a little bit of work on the infrastructure, but we can very quickly kind of scale it multiple orders of magnitude. With this technology and just where the state of the market is, we very quickly had to move from one LLM to a multi-LLM, an LLM agnostic infrastructure. We found that each pipeline stage, different models performed differently for each one of those stages and for each one of those customers. We also had to build our own middleware and kind of infrastructure layers to handle model management, prompt management, batching, retrying, and all that stuff, which I'm happy to dig into. But that's really what's happening under the hood is we're processing these conversations. But in order to do that, we've had to build a relatively large amount of our own infrastructure to be able to do that, which is, again, a big difference from the cloud software days, cloud 1.0 software days, where a lot of that infrastructure is available in companies and products from the other cloud providers.
And Alex, that kind of it reminds me almost of like the early AWS days models of like, hey, we want to sell something. Oh, by the way, we have to build all these other things to be able to sell that thing. And you ended up with, quite an operations backend and a framework that becomes a differentiator for you eventually. And so I guess, how do you balance that, this whole idea of like on the front end, trying to help organizations with conversational intelligence, But then on the back end, you're removing a lot of friction in, AI ops, ML ops, LLM ops, whatever we want to call this, right? And as you mentioned, there's a huge barrier entry to scaling. Is that also of interest to the customers? Like, tell everyone a little bit about like front of house versus back of the house on something like that.
Yeah, and I think actually the industry and quite a few companies are thinking about this wrongly. At the end of the day, you need to back out of the customer problem, and you need to be able to solve customers' issue. Are customers interested in AI? Sure, they are. But at the end of the day, our customers and any customers, they don't care whether they don't care what our infrastructure looks like. They've got a problem that they're trying to solve, and they care if we are able to solve it. And so you say that our infrastructure at this point kind of creates a high barrier to entry, and I suppose that's true. But I would also say I don't want that to be the case. I want to focus 100% of our time on solving customer problems. I don't want to have to build the Splunk equivalent for LLM applications. That's not how we're going to win. Our customers don't care about it. They just want their problems to be solved. And so we are just doing what is necessary to be able to handle our customers' requirements. A lot of this is to be able to handle our customers' scale. I think a lot of things you see is a lot of the stuff out there at the application layer is still in the prototype phase. Hey, just not a lot of traction or smaller companies kind of engaging with these products. At the enterprise level, and as you can imagine, there are millions of conversations. Millions of conversations to us are tens of billions to hundreds of billions of tokens. Each conversation we have to process multiple times, and there's RAG pipelines and embedding pipelines that we have to do. And so something that was very easy to prototype, again, like becomes much harder to scale given the current limitations of the infrastructure. But as I said, it's like that the only thing we focus on is, can we back out of the customer problem, leverage this new technology to truly solve our customers' problem in a better, faster, cheaper way, an order of magnitude better, faster, cheaper.
Yeah, we've sort of jumped back and forth between sort of customer problems, common customer problems, and then how you guys have gone about building the system and running the system. What are some of the things from purely a customer perspective they tend to see as results, right? Like they could care less how your system is built, like you said. What types of results do they see? What are sort of the wow moments, the aha moments that they go, oh, okay, like you said, I can scale from what would have taken 100 people to I could do it with one person, or like I can make decisions for the business better.
Yeah, the wow moment is pretty consistent generally, and it's very specific on a per customer basis. But more generally, it's always a surprise. It's like, oh wow, I didn't know that was happening. I didn't know that this was a problem, or I didn't know that this is how our customers felt, or something like that. And then what that surprise is obviously varies per customer. It's like, oh gosh, I didn't know that we had this product issue. Like, we had to fix this product issue. I didn't know that our marketing site was causing enough confusion that people were trying to call in to place their orders because they didn't know how to navigate the marketing site. There was a bug in the marketing site. I didn't know that this was a key driver of churn. Like, that's great because I can quickly fix it. I just didn't know that it was there. And so it's very much, our customers come to us saying, like, we don't know what we don't know. And then they roll out Pathlight, and then they say, now we know. And that's really important. And one piece of technology that's been very important to giving our customers a deep understanding of their conversations is a product we recently publicly announced as Insight Streams. And that is, for lack of a better term, our first kind of foray into a more of an agentic, agent-driven infrastructure where, we have this processing pipeline where we are analyzing every single conversation. We then have layered on top a product that leverages AI agents to then make sense of all of this incredible amount of data that we are now creating. And so the the number one thing here is the ability to take millions of data points and summarize it up to that leadership level. As I said, the leadership level is the folks who care the most about what's happening with their customers. But you've got millions of data points, and so Insight Streams has been incredibly important to taking those millions of data points, summarizing them into what we call reflections, which are little groups of observations and patterns, summarizing those reflections into sub-themes and then into themes, such that an executive has a 30,000 foot view of what's happening on the ground.
Yeah, and just ballpark for folks listening, like how long does it typically take to between kind of getting the system set up and people being like, oh, okay, I'm seeing those insights, like not the stream itself, but like, okay, the system's had enough time to go through and process stuff and start to give us, is it a couple of weeks? Is it a couple of months? Like what's the sort of turnaround time typically?
This is another, I think, breakthrough that is thanks to the transformer model and large language models, is that through transfer learning and through just the broad powers of this technology, is it is ready out of the box, and you can get started very quickly. And yes, of course, there's an opportunity to tune and improve over time, but whereas if you were trying to solve this with existing machine learning, like we're talking months with thousands of rows of training data and tons of tweaking just to approximate like 1% of the capabilities of what generative AI gives us. But most importantly, with generative AI, we are talking days until we are starting to get the first trends or patterns coming through. It just works so well out of the box. If you kind of partner the power of this technology with the infrastructure that we've built. Of course, like I'm biased and I'm talking my book in many ways, but it felt like in SaaS over the last 10 years, implementation times were growing. And what used to part of the original pitch of SaaS, part of the original pitch of Salesforce.com was we can get up and running very quickly. And perhaps as those applications got more complicated or the bar got lowered or something like that, implementation windows started growing again. And so what I've been really excited to see is that time to value and time to launch, thanks to this technology, has really gotten back into the days and weeks versus like the months and quarters that we were used to.
Yeah. And it's funny you use Salesforce as the example of that, because it is probably the poster child for SaaS complexity gone awry. So that's great. And it's really good to see also as we're exploring this, as part of the podcast journey here, we've been learning lots about the technology and about the different models and different types that are out there, but also to see this now turning into practical applications that weren't even necessarily possible before this. And so the future of it is certainly very exciting. So Alex, I'm going to kind of wrap us there. Is there, for those that want to know more about this, can they reach out to you? What do you prefer as a kind of next steps if they want to learn more?
If you want to learn more about Pathlight, the best thing to do is go to our website at pathlight.com. If you want to connect with me directly and just talk shop, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to chat anytime about this. It's the most excited I've been in the Valley in a long time.
Very, very cool. Very cool. Listen, Alex, thank you so much for the time. Folks, if you're listening, we are trying to do our best to not only kind of hit all aspects of what's going around the AI space, but also kind of put some things in practical perspective. So, hopefully this was one of those episodes in which we got a chance to not just dig into under the covers, but really kind of bring it to light in terms of, hopefully how it'll help your business, how it'll make sort of quick impact, and also how it'll, help remove some of those tedious burdens that were holding back the business. So, Alex, thank you so much for the time today. We really, really appreciate it. Folks, with that, we're going to wrap it up. Thank you all for listening, as always. Thank you all for telling a friend. Thank you all for giving us a bunch of feedback here recently on, some of the changes we've been thinking about making for the show. So we appreciate that. We'll wrap it up, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to The Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.